I was leaving the grocery store when I saw her fall. An elderly woman, maybe 75, slipped on a patch of black ice in the parking lot and went down hard. Her shopping bags scattered, cans of soup rolling across the frozen asphalt. I didn't even think. I just ran over, my boots crunching on the ice, and helped her up. Her name was Mrs. Delphine Washington, she told me, rubbing her hip with a grimace. She thanked me 3 times, her voice warm despite the cold, and I gathered her groceries while she steadied herself against my arm. That's when she did it. As I handed her the last bag, she leaned in close, her breath foggy in the winter air, and whispered directly into my ear. Baby girl, when your husband is away, check the deep snow at the side of your garage. Then she pulled back, smiled like she'd just commented on the weather, and walked away to her car. I stood there frozen, and it wasn't from the cold. My heart hammered against my ribs. How did she know I was married? How did she know about my garage? I looked down at my left hand, at the simple gold band I'd worn for 8 years, and tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just confused. Old people sometimes got things mixed up. Maybe she thought I was someone else. But something in her eyes when she'd said it, something sharp and knowing, told me she wasn't confused at all. I got into my car with shaking hands, loaded my own groceries into the trunk, and sat there for 5 minutes trying to calm my racing thoughts. The heater blasted warm air that did nothing to stop the chill spreading through my chest. When your husband is away, check the deep snow at the side of your garage. But before we begin, please leave us a comment telling us which state or city you're watching from. And please don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more compelling stories. My husband was Terrell. We'd been married for 8 years, together for 10. He worked as a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, traveled often, sometimes for days at a time. He was away right now, actually. Had been for the past 3 days, at some conference in another state. He'd be back tomorrow evening. I thought about calling him, telling him about the strange encounter. But what would I even say? An old lady I helped told me to check the snow by our garage. He'd think I was losing it. I drove home in a daze, the 20-minute commute passing in a blur of white streets and gray skies. We lived in a modest, 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors' names and waved when they saw each other shoveling driveways, the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat there staring at the garage, the side of the garage. There was a narrow space between our garage and the neighbor's fence, maybe 4 feet wide. It had snowed heavily last week, one of those storms that dumped nearly 2 feet overnight, and nobody bothered clearing that side area. Why would they? It was just dead space. Nothing there but the bare wall of the garage and some old landscaping stones buried under the snow. I grabbed my groceries and went inside, my mind still replaying the old woman's words. My 4-year-old daughter, Amara, ran up to greet me, her braids bouncing as she jumped into my arms. My mother, who'd been watching her while I shopped, was in the kitchen making tea. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Shayla," my mother said, studying my face with that intuitive concern only mothers possess. I forced a smile and shook my head. "Just cold. It's brutal out there." After my mother left and Amara was settled in front of her cartoons with a snack, I stood at the kitchen window that overlooked the backyard. From this angle, I could see the side of the garage, the deep snow piled against it, pristine and undisturbed. Innocent. What was I supposed to be looking for? And why did that old woman know to tell me? I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to distract myself with normal things. I folded laundry, helped Amara with a puzzle, started preparing dinner, but my eyes kept drifting to that window, to that side of the garage. The sun set early, the way it does in deep winter, and the backyard disappeared into darkness. I put Amara to bed at 8, read her 2 stories, and kissed her forehead. "When's Daddy coming home?" she asked, her voice sleepy. "Tomorrow, baby, one more sleep." She nodded and rolled over, clutching her stuffed elephant. I stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe, feeling that fierce, protective love that motherhood had awakened in me. Whatever was buried in that snow, whatever I was about to find, I had to know. I had to protect her. I changed into warmer clothes, layers of thermal underwear, and a heavy coat, and found the shovel in the garage. The outdoor lights cast long shadows across the yard. The temperature had dropped to somewhere below 20 degrees, and my breath came out in thick clouds. I walked around to the side of the garage, my boots sinking into the snow with each step. This close, the snow was nearly 3 feet deep, piled high from the combination of the storm and the drift pattern created by the garage wall. I stood there for a moment, shovel in hand, wondering if I was crazy. What was I doing out here in the freezing cold, digging in the snow because some random old woman told me to? But I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep until I looked. I started digging. The first few shovelfuls revealed nothing but more snow, white and clean. I worked methodically, creating a trench along the garage wall, my muscles burning from the effort. The cold bit at my exposed face, my nose going numb. I'd been digging for maybe 10 minutes when the shovel hit something solid. Not the ground, not the garage wall, something else. My heart stopped. I dropped to my knees and started brushing away snow with my gloved hands, my breath coming faster now. The object was dark, black or maybe dark blue. Fabric. I kept digging, clearing more snow, and that's when I saw it. A duffel bag. Large, heavy-duty, the kind you'd take to the gym or use for travel. It was frozen into the snow, partially buried, like someone had shoved it there, and then the storm had covered it. I pulled at the zipper with shaking hands. It was stuck from the cold. I yanked harder, and it finally gave way with a grinding sound. I opened the bag. Inside were stacks of cash, hundreds of them. Bundles of 20s, 50s, hundreds, held together with rubber bands. I stared at the money, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. There had to be thousands of dollars here. Tens of thousands, maybe more. And underneath the money, wrapped in plastic, was something else. A gun. I jerked my hands back like I'd been burned. My breathing came in short, panicked gasps. What the hell was this? Why was there a bag full of cash and a gun buried in the snow beside my garage? And then, like ice water in my veins, the realization hit me. Terrell. This was Terrell's. It had to be. Who else would bury something here? Who else had access to this property? My husband had buried a bag full of money and a gun in the snow beside our garage. I sat back in the snow, my legs giving out, and I just stared at the bag. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was he dealing drugs? Was he stealing from his company? Was he involved in something criminal? Something dangerous? How long had this been here? He'd been home last week when the snow fell. He could have put it here then, knowing the storm would cover it completely. Knowing I'd never think to look. I thought about the man I'd married. Terrell, with his easy smile and his steady job. Terrell, who coached youth basketball on weekends and called his mother every Sunday. Terrell, who'd held my hand through 20 hours of labor and cried when Amara was born. That man didn't match the man who would bury illegal money and a gun in our yard. But evidence didn't lie. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I was going to call him, demand to know what this was. But something stopped me. Some instinct for self-preservation, some voice in my head that sounded a lot like Mrs. Washington's. If I called him now, if I let him know I'd found this, what would he do? If he was involved in something dangerous enough to require this much cash and a weapon, what would he do to keep it quiet? What would he do to me? To Amara? I looked at the bag again, really looked at it, and noticed something I'd missed before. There was blood on the gun. Not a lot, just a smear on the handle, brown from being frozen. My stomach turned. I managed to get to my feet, grabbed the shovel, and very carefully, very deliberately, I reburied the bag. I covered it with snow, smoothed it over, made it look untouched again. My hands were numb, my whole body shaking from cold and adrenaline. When I was done, when the side of the garage looked exactly as it had before, I went back inside. I locked the door. I checked all the windows, made sure everything was secure. Then I went to Amara's room and just watched her sleep. this beautiful, innocent child who didn't know that her mother's world had just collapsed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing through scenarios. By morning, I'd made a decision. I couldn't call the police, not yet, because I didn't know what I was dealing with, and I had to protect Amara above everything else. If I went to the police with a bag of money and a gun, they'd arrest Terrell. They'd investigate our finances, our home. They'd question me. Amara would be traumatized. And if Terrell was connected to dangerous people, if this money belonged to someone else, someone who'd come looking for it, then going to the police might put us in even more danger. No, I needed information first. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I made any moves. When the sun came up, I called my mother and asked if she could keep Amara for the day. "You sound tired, baby," she said. "You feeling all right?" "Just need to catch up on some things," I lied. "Maybe take a nap." She agreed to pick Amara up, and after they left, I went through the house like a detective. I started with Terrell's home office. He had a desk in the spare bedroom where he did paperwork, kept files. I'd never had reason to go through it before. Trust, I'd thought. Marriage was built on trust. I searched every drawer, every file folder. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Work documents, old tax returns, insurance papers. But in the bottom drawer, hidden under a stack of old magazines, I found a burner phone. A cheap prepaid phone that I'd never seen before. My hands trembled as I turned it on. It had a passcode. I tried Terrell's birthday. Wrong. I tried Amara's birthday. Wrong. I tried our anniversary. Wrong. I only had one more try before it locked me out. I thought about what I knew about Terrell, what numbers were important to him. Then I remembered something. His mother's address, the house where he grew up, the numbers of the address. I tried it. The phone unlocked. There were only a few contacts, all listed by single letters. No names. And there were text messages, dozens of them, going back months. I opened the most recent conversation with someone labeled only as M. The messages made my blood run cold. Package secure? Yes. Location confirmed. Timeline? 3 days, then collection. Understood. Remember, no traces. The texts went back weeks. Cryptic conversations about packages, locations, collections, payments. Nothing explicit, nothing that directly incriminated anyone, but the pattern was clear. Terrell was involved in something organized, something planned. I kept digging through the phone, my horror growing with each conversation. There were references to amounts, always in code. 50 units, which I assumed meant $50,000. Clean product, which could mean drugs, or guns, or something else illegal. And then I found photos. Not many, just a handful, buried in the phone's gallery. Photos of license plates, photos of addresses, photos of people taken from a distance, like surveillance shots. One of the photos was of a man I didn't recognize, standing outside a warehouse. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. Another photo showed the inside of a storage unit, stacked with boxes. And the last photo, the one that made me drop the phone, was of our house. Someone had taken a photo of our house, from across the street at night. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely pick the phone back up. Why would someone take a photo of our house? Unless they were watching us. Unless Terrell wasn't the only one involved. Unless someone else knew where we lived. I heard a car door slam outside and nearly jumped out of my skin. I rushed to the window, heart pounding, but it was just the neighbor getting his mail. I forced myself to breathe. I had to think. I had to be smart about this. I took photos of the burner phone with my own phone. Every text message, every contact, every photo. I documented everything, then turned the burner phone off and put it back exactly where I'd found it. If Terrell checked, he needed to think nothing had been disturbed. Then I went through the rest of his things. His dresser drawers, his closet, his car. In the trunk of his car, underneath the spare tire, I found another prepaid phone. This one was dead, but I took it. Evidence. By afternoon, I was exhausted, running on adrenaline and fear. I sat in the living room and tried to piece together what I knew. Terrell was involved in something criminal. He had burner phones, coded messages, surveillance photos. He had a bag of money and a gun buried outside. Someone had taken a photo of our house, and an old woman had known to warn me. That last part still haunted me. How did Mrs. Washington know? I pulled out my phone and searched for her name, though I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Delphine Washington. I found her on social media, her profile sparse but public. She lived in the same city, had adult children, posted occasionally about church events and her grandchildren. Nothing unusual, nothing that explained how she'd known about the bag, about my husband, about any of this, unless she was involved somehow, unless she was part of whatever Terrell was mixed up in. But why would she warn me? Why risk exposing whatever operation they had going? None of it made sense. I was so deep in my thoughts that I didn't hear the car pull into the driveway. I didn't hear the garage door open. The first thing I heard was the front door, and by then it was too late to hide what I was doing, to school my expression into something normal. Terrell walked in, pulling his rolling suitcase behind him, and stopped when he saw my face. "Baby?" His voice was concerned, loving, the voice of my husband. "You okay? You look upset." I stood up, my legs unsteady, and tried to smile. Failed. "You're home early." Meetings wrapped up faster than expected. He let go of his suitcase and crossed the room to me, reaching for my hand. "Shayla, what's wrong? Where's Amara?" "At my mom's." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant. He studied my face and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Calculation. What happened? This was the moment where I either confronted him with everything I knew or I played along. I thought about Amara, about the gun, about the photo of our house. I thought about self-preservation. "I'm just not feeling well," I said, pulling my hand away from his gently. "Might be coming down with something. Didn't want Amara to catch it." He nodded slowly, but his eyes never left my face, searching. "You sure that's all?" "Yeah, I'm sure." I walked past him toward the kitchen, needing to put distance between us. "You hungry? I can make something." "Shayla." His voice stopped me. I turned. He was still standing in the same spot, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "If something was wrong," he said carefully, "you'd tell me, right?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning. "Of course," I lied. He smiled then, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good, because we're partners, remember? We tell each other everything. I nodded and turned back to the kitchen, my heart hammering. He didn't believe me, and I didn't believe him. That night, we moved around each other like strangers. He took a shower, unpacked his suitcase, sat in his office for an hour with the door closed. I made dinner, picked at my food, cleaned up. Normal domestic routines that felt like a performance. When we finally went to bed, he fell asleep quickly, or pretended to. I lay awake beside him, this man I'd shared a bed with for 8 years, and realized I had no idea who he was. I thought about the money buried in the snow, about the gun with blood on it, about the cryptic messages and surveillance photos, and I thought about Mrs. Washington, the old woman who'd warned me, who'd somehow known I needed to see what was hidden. In the morning, I made a decision. I needed to find Mrs. Washington again. I needed to understand how she knew, and what she wasn't telling me. Because she was the only lead I had, the only person who might be able to help me understand what I was dealing with before I made my next move. Before I decided whether to run, or fight, or call the police. Before I figured out how to protect my daughter from the monster I'd apparently married. I waited until Terrell left for work, watched his car disappear down the street, and then I started searching. Mrs. Washington had told me her name. She'd been shopping at the same grocery store I used. That was something. I drove back to that grocery store, parked, and waited. It was a long shot. She might not even shop there regularly, but I had to try. I sat in my car for 3 hours, watching people come and go before I finally saw her. She walked slowly across the parking lot, bundled in a heavy coat, heading for the entrance. I got out of my car and followed her inside, my heart racing. I found her in the canned goods aisle, studying soup labels. When I approached, she looked up and showed no surprise at seeing me. It was like she'd been expecting me. "Mrs. Washington," I said quietly. She glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to overhear, then nodded. "Let's talk outside, baby girl. Not here." We walked out together, and she led me to her car, a worn sedan parked at the far end of the lot. She unlocked it and gestured for me to get in the passenger side. Once we were both inside with the doors closed, she turned to me. "You found it." It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" My voice cracked. "How did you know it was there?" She sighed, her weathered hands resting on the steering wheel. "Because my son put it there." I stared at her. "Your son?" "My son works with your husband." Her voice was heavy with something that sounded like grief. "They're part of a crew, been running operations for about 2 years now. Moving product, collecting debts, cleaning money. Started small, but it's gotten bigger. Dangerous." My mouth went dry. "What kind of product? Does it matter?" She looked at me with tired eyes. "Drugs, guns, stolen goods, whatever pays. The specifics don't change what it is." "Why are you telling me this? If your son is involved, why would you warn me?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Because last week something went wrong. A deal went bad. Someone got shot. The gun. The blood on the gun. There's going to be fallout from it, Mrs. Washington continued. "The people they were working with, they're looking for someone to blame. Your husband and my son, they're vulnerable right now. And when men like that get scared, when they feel cornered, they do desperate things." "You think Terrell would hurt me?" The question came out as a whisper. She turned to face me fully. "I think when the police come looking, which they will, your husband might decide it's easier to let someone else take the fall. Maybe claim the money was yours. Maybe say he didn't know it was there. Maybe worse." She paused. "I've watched my son make bad choices for years. Watched him get deeper into this life. I can't save him. He's made his bed. But you have a little girl. You have a chance to get out before everything falls apart." Tears burned my eyes. "What do I do?" "First, you document everything, every piece of evidence you can find. You're going to need it." "I already did. I took photos of everything." She nodded approvingly. "Good. Smart. Second, you get that money somewhere safe. Not in your house, not where he can find it. Because that money is evidence, but it's also leverage. You might need it." "You want me to take the money?" She gave me a look. "Baby girl, do you think your husband earned that money honestly? Do you think you owe him protection? That money is dirty, but it's also your insurance policy. Take it, hide it, use it if you need to run. I can't just take money that doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to him either. And right now, you need to think about survival, yours and your daughter's." I wiped my eyes with shaking hands. "Then what?" "Then you wait. You watch. You keep playing the loving wife until you know what your husband is planning to do. Once you know that, once you understand how he's going to try to protect himself, then you make your move." "What move?" "That depends on what you find out. Maybe you go to the police with evidence and make a deal for immunity. Maybe you disappear with your daughter and start over somewhere new. Maybe you threaten to expose everything unless he walks away quietly. You'll know when the time comes." I sat there processing everything she'd told me, my mind reeling. "Why?" I asked again. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me." She smiled sadly. "I know what it's like to love someone and realize they're not who you thought. I know what it's like to make excuses, to want to believe they'll change. I wasted years on that. You're young. You have time to build a different life. And that little girl of yours, she deserves a mother who's brave enough to do what's right." She reached into her purse and pulled out a piece of paper with a phone number written on it. "This is my cell. If you need anything, if things get dangerous, you call me. Understand? I took the paper with trembling hands. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. It's going to get harder before it gets better. I got out of her car and walked back to mine in a daze. Everything she'd said confirmed my worst fears. Terrell wasn't just involved in something shady. He was part of an organized criminal operation, and someone had been shot. That night, I waited until Terrell was asleep, then I snuck out to the garage. I bundled up again, grabbed the shovel, and went to the side of the house. I dug up the duffel bag, my muscles remembering the work from a few nights before. This time I didn't open it. I didn't look inside. I just pulled it free from the snow, heavy and unwieldy, and carried it to my car. I'd parked on the street instead of in the garage, telling Terrell I wanted to make it easier to leave early in the morning. He hadn't questioned it. I put the bag in my trunk, under a blanket, and covered the hole I'd made in the snow. Then I drove. It was 2 a.m, the streets empty and dark. I drove to the other side of town, to a storage facility I'd found online. 24-hour access, no questions asked. I rented a unit using cash, under a fake name, and locked the duffel bag inside. Evidence, leverage, insurance, whatever I needed it to be. When I got home, Terrell was still asleep. I slipped back into bed, my body exhausted but my mind wired. I'd just stolen potentially tens of thousands of dollars from my husband, from whatever criminal enterprise he was involved in. There was no going back now. The next few days were a careful dance. I played the role of loving wife while watching Terrell for any sign that he knew the money was gone. He went to work, came home, played with Amara, watched television. Normal. But I noticed things I'd missed before. How he constantly checked his phones, both his regular one and occasionally disappearing into his office with one I assumed was a burner. How he'd tense up when certain calls came in, stepping outside to take them. How he'd started sleeping with his phone under his pillow. He was waiting for something. And 4 days after I'd moved the money, it happened. I was making breakfast when Terrell came downstairs, his face ashen. "I have to go out of town again," he said, his voice tight. "Emergency meeting." "When?" "Today. Now, actually. I'll be gone for a few days." I turned from the stove to look at him. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, just work stuff. Complicated client situation." He was lying. He couldn't look me in the eye. "Okay," I said carefully. "Should I be worried?" He crossed the room and kissed my forehead, a gesture that would have comforted me a week ago. Now it just made my skin crawl. "No, everything's fine. I just need to handle some things. Take care of Amara. I'll call you when I can." He was gone within an hour, throwing clothes into a bag, barely saying goodbye to our daughter. As soon as his car was out of sight, I called Mrs. Washington. "He's running," she said as soon as I explained. "My son is too. They've gone to ground." "What does that mean?" "It means the heat is on. Police must be getting close to something, or their bosses are pressuring them. Either way, they're scared. What do I do? You stay calm. You take care of your daughter, and you wait for them to make the next move." But I couldn't just wait. That night, after Amara was asleep, I went to Terrell's office and searched it again, more thoroughly this time. I found a laptop hidden in a locked drawer. I'd seen him use it before, but never paid attention. I managed to pick the lock using a bobby pin and a tutorial I found online, my hands shaking the whole time. The laptop was password protected, but I tried the same combination I'd used on the burner phone. It worked. What I found on that laptop changed everything. There were spreadsheets, detailed records of transactions going back 18 months, dates, amounts, product types, locations. It was a complete accounting of every illegal deal Terrell had been part of. Drugs, stolen merchandise, even some kind of fraud scheme involving fake prescriptions through his pharmaceutical connections. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had moved through these operations. And it wasn't just Terrell. There were names I recognized. His friend from college who I'd always thought was a real estate agent. A coworker he sometimes met for drinks. Even the guy who owned the barber shop where Terrell got his hair cut. It was a network, carefully organized, with Terrell somewhere in the middle. But what made my blood run cold was a folder labeled with my name. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were documents, forged documents, bank statements in my name showing deposits I'd never made, email printouts allegedly from me discussing business deals I'd never been part of, even a fake lease agreement for a storage unit, signed with a forgery of my signature. He was setting me up, creating a paper trail that would make it look like I was involved, like I was the one who'd been handling the money and facilitating the deals. If the police came looking, all roads would lead to me. I sat back from the laptop, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. This was his plan. This was how he intended to protect himself, by making me the fall guy. My wife, the stay-at-home mom, was secretly running a criminal enterprise and I had no idea. I could hear his defense in my head, see him playing the shocked, betrayed husband. And with these forged documents, who would believe me when I said I knew nothing about it? I took photos of everything on the laptop. Every spreadsheet, every forged document, every incriminating file. My phone's storage was nearly full by the time I was done. Then I closed the laptop and put it back exactly where I'd found it, locked the drawer, and walked downstairs on shaky legs. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the dark backyard, at the spot where the money had been buried. He'd planned this. For months, maybe longer. He'd been creating a narrative where I was the criminal and he was the victim. And he'd done it while smiling at me across the dinner table, while kissing me goodnight, while reading bedtime stories to our daughter. The man I'd loved, the man I'd built a life with, had been systematically destroying me. I thought about running, taking Amara and disappearing. I had the money from the storage unit. We could go somewhere far away, start over with new names. But that would make me look guilty. That would make it seem like I was running because I had something to hide. And Terrell would use that. He'd tell the police I'd fled because I was the real criminal, and he'd probably get custody of Amara in absentia. No, running wasn't the answer. I needed to expose him first. I needed to make sure that when everything came crashing down, the truth was so clear, so well documented, that there was no way he could pin this on me. The next morning, I made a series of careful moves. First, I went to a lawyer. Not a criminal defense attorney, not yet, but a family law specialist my sister had used during her divorce. I told her I thought my husband was having an affair and I wanted to protect myself financially. I showed her some of the documents I'd found, the real financial records, without mentioning the criminal aspects. I need everything documented, I told her. Every asset, every account. I need to make sure that if we divorce, I'm protected. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Simone, nodded. We'll do a full accounting, and I'd recommend opening a separate bank account in just your name. Start establishing financial independence. I did exactly that. Opened a new account at a different bank, one Terrell didn't use. I didn't put much money in it, just enough to make it look legitimate. Then I went to see my sister, Keisha. She lived across town with her 2 kids, worked as a nurse, and had always been the stronger one between us. I showed up at her door with Amara, and she knew immediately something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, ushering us inside. I waited until Amara was playing with Keisha's kids in the other room. Then I told her everything. The old woman, the money, the burner phones, the laptop, the forged documents, all of it. Keisha listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You need to go to the police." "I can't. Not yet. He set it up to look like I'm involved. If I go now, they might arrest me." "Then you need to get ahead of it. You need to make sure your story is on record first, before he has a chance to spin it." "How?" "A lawyer. A real criminal defense attorney. Someone who can help you navigate this and make sure you're protected. And you need to document everything you're doing, every step. Keep a journal, date, and time stamped. Make it clear that you only just found out about this, that you're trying to do the right thing." She grabbed my hands. "Shayla, this is serious. This isn't just about your marriage anymore. If someone was shot, if there's a murder investigation, you could be charged as an accessory if they think you knew about it." "I didn't know." "I believe you, but you need to prove it." She was right. I knew she was right. but I was terrified. That afternoon, Keisha helped me find a criminal defense attorney. His name was Jerome Washington, and yes, I noticed the last name. I asked if he was related to Delphine Washington. He paused, then said, "That's my mother." "How do you know her?" Small world. Or maybe not a coincidence at all. Maybe Mrs. Washington had been steering me toward her son all along. I told Jerome everything, showed him all the evidence I'd gathered. He listened with the practiced calm of someone who'd heard terrible things before, making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Okay. First, you're not in immediate legal danger. You've clearly been gathering evidence, not participating in crimes. But your husband has created a significant problem by forging documents in your name. Can I go to the police now?" "Not yet. If you go to them with this, they'll investigate both of you. And while we can probably prove you weren't involved, it'll be messy and traumatic. There's a better way." "What way?" "We make a deal. We approach the prosecutor's office through the right channels, explain that you discovered your husband's criminal activity, and offer to cooperate in exchange for full immunity and protection." "You mean I testify against him?" "If it comes to that, yes. But more importantly, you give them everything you found. The laptop files, the burner phone messages, the money. You hand it all over and make it clear that you're a victim here, not a participant." I thought about Terrell. About the man he used to be or the man I thought he was. Testifying against him, sending him to prison, destroying our family. But then I thought about the forged documents, the months of lies, the plan to frame me for his crimes. He'd made his choice already. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." Jerome started making arrangements, reaching out to contacts in the district attorney's office, setting up a meeting. It would take a few days to coordinate. In the meantime, I was supposed to act normal, not let Terrell know anything was happening. But Terrell didn't come home. Days passed, and he didn't call, didn't text beyond brief messages saying he was still dealing with work issues. I called Mrs. Washington to ask if she'd heard from her son. "No," she said, her voice heavy. "But I heard from some of his friends. There's a warrant out, for both of them." "A warrant?" "The shooting, the police identified them. It's only a matter of time before they're picked up." "What happens to me if they find Terrell first, if he tells them I was involved?" "That's why you need to get to the police before he does. You need to control the narrative." Jerome agreed. We moved up the meeting with the prosecutor's office to the next day. I dropped Amara off with my mother, told her I had a job interview, and needed to look professional. My mother was thrilled, completely unaware that I was actually going to potentially destroy my marriage and expose my husband as a criminal. The prosecutor's office was in a gray government building downtown. Jerome and I sat in a conference room across from an assistant district attorney named Patricia Coleman and two detectives. I told them everything. I showed them everything. The photos of the burner phone messages, the laptop files, the forged documents with my name. I told them about the money buried in the snow, now in a storage unit. I told them about Mrs. Washington's warning, about discovering Terrell's double life. They listened, asked questions, took notes. One of the detectives left the room and came back with a file folder. "We've been investigating a shooting that occurred 3 weeks ago," he said. "Drug deal gone wrong. The victim survived but isn't cooperating. We've been trying to identify the shooters." He pulled out a photo. It was Terrell. A surveillance photo from a gas station, timestamp matching the night of the shooting. "This is your husband?" I nodded, my throat tight. "We've been building a case against him and several associates for multiple crimes. Drug trafficking, illegal weapons, fraud. But we've been missing some pieces. What you're giving us, this fills in a lot of gaps." Patricia Coleman leaned forward. "Mrs. Reynolds, we're prepared to offer you full immunity from prosecution in exchange for your cooperation. You'll need to provide access to the storage unit, the laptop, any other physical evidence. And you'll need to testify if this goes to trial. Okay? You understand that this will likely end your marriage? That your husband will probably go to prison for a significant amount of time?" "I understand." She slid a document across the table. This is the immunity agreement. Read it carefully. Once you sign it, you're committed to full cooperation. I read through the legalese with Jerome's help. It was straightforward. In exchange for everything I knew and everything I'd found, I would not be charged with any crimes related to Terrell's activities. I signed it. Within an hour, I was in an unmarked police car with 2 detectives, driving to the storage facility. I unlocked the unit and showed them the duffel bag. They photographed it, documented it, seized it as evidence. Back at the police station, they took my statement again, officially this time, recorded and transcribed. I told the story from the beginning. The grocery store, the old woman, the buried money. I told them about the burner phones, the laptop, the forged documents. I gave them everything. By the time we were done, it was dark outside. Jerome drove me home, and we sat in his car outside my house for a moment. "What happens now?" I asked. "They'll move fast. They'll pick up your husband and his associates, probably within the next few days. There'll be arraignments, preliminary hearings. The media will probably cover it since it's a significant drug operation. Your name will come up. Will I be safe? The DA's office will provide some protection if they think you're at risk. But honestly, these guys aren't exactly cartel kingpins. They're mid-level dealers who got in over their heads. The real danger was from your husband trying to frame you, and that threat is neutralized now." I nodded, exhausted. "Thank you for helping me. My mother has good instincts about people. When she told me about you, she said you were stronger than you knew." I think she was right. I went inside, checked on Amara, who my mother had brought back and put to bed, and then I just sat in the dark living room. My phone buzzed, a text from Terrell. "Coming home tomorrow. Miss you." I stared at the message. Did he know? Did he have any idea what I'd done, what was coming for him? I texted back, "See you then." But he wouldn't make it home, because the next morning, Jerome called to tell me they'd arrested Terrell at a motel 2 states over. They'd picked up his partners too, including Mrs. Washington's son. They'd all been charged with a long list of crimes: drug trafficking, weapons charges, fraud, conspiracy. And for Terrell specifically, attempted criminal facilitation through forged documents. They'd found the laptop. The news broke that afternoon. My phone started ringing off the hook. Friends, family, neighbors, all wanting to know if it was true, if my husband was really a drug dealer, if I'd known. I didn't answer most of the calls. I put out a brief statement through Jerome's office, saying I was cooperating with authorities and asking for privacy, but there was no privacy. News vans camped outside my house. Reporters knocked on my door. My mother showed up in tears, demanding to know what was happening. I told her the truth as much as I could. She held me while I cried, told me I'd done the right thing, that she was proud of me for protecting Amara. The preliminary hearing was 2 weeks later. I had to testify about finding the evidence, about the forged documents. Terrell was there in an orange jumpsuit, shackled, looking like a stranger. He stared at me while I testified, his expression unreadable. After I finished, the judge denied bail, citing flight risk and danger to witnesses, specifically, danger to me. The prosecutor had argued that Terrell had demonstrated intent to harm me by framing me for his crimes, and that if released, he might try to silence me. Terrell was led away, still staring at me. In his eyes I saw hatred. The man who'd once loved me, or claimed to, now looked at me like I was his worst enemy. Maybe I was. The trial was set for 6 months later. In the meantime, I had to figure out how to rebuild my life. I filed for divorce immediately. Terrell tried to fight it from prison, but with his criminal charges and my documented evidence of his betrayal, the court granted it quickly. I got full custody of Amara, the house, everything. The money from the duffel bag was seized as evidence, but the prosecutor's office indicated that once the case was closed, unclaimed criminal proceeds sometimes went to victims or into victim compensation funds. I might see some of it eventually, though I wasn't counting on it. I got a job, part-time at first, then full-time once Amara started kindergarten. Administrative work, nothing glamorous, but honest money. My own money. I started therapy to process everything that had happened: the betrayal, the fear, the guilt over destroying my daughter's family, even though I knew it was necessary. Amara asked about her father sometimes. Where was he? When was he coming home? I told her age-appropriate versions of the truth. Daddy made bad choices. Daddy had to go away for a while. Maybe when she was older, I'd tell her the full story, or maybe she'd figure it out herself. The trial, when it finally happened, was brutal. I had to testify again, this time in front of a jury, reliving everything. The defense tried to paint me as a scorned wife seeking revenge, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The burner phones, the laptop files, the surveillance footage, the money, the gun with Terrell's fingerprints and DNA. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. Terrell was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His associates got similar sentences. Mrs. Washington's son, 10 years. I saw her at the sentencing. We made eye contact across the courtroom, two mothers who'd lost the men they loved to choices those men had made. She nodded at me once, a gesture of respect or solidarity or grief. I nodded back. After the sentencing, I went to visit her. She invited me in, made tea, and we sat in her living room. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm okay, taking it day by day. You?" "The same. I've been visiting my son. He's angry at me for warning you, for starting all this. He thinks if I'd stayed quiet, they might have gotten away with it longer." "Do you regret it?" She was quiet for a moment, then shook her head. "No. Those men were on a path to destruction no matter what. All I did was make sure you and your little girl didn't get destroyed with them. That's not something I'll ever regret." "Why did you do it? Really?" She smiled sadly. "Because 30 years ago I was you. My husband got involved with bad people, did bad things. I didn't know until it was too late. When it all fell apart, I was left alone with a baby, no money, no support, and a last name that everyone associated with crime. I spent years clawing my way back from that. I didn't want that for you. Your husband..." "Is he?" "He died in prison, 22 years ago. My son barely remembers him." She sipped her tea. "I tried to raise him better, to show him a different path. But some people, they're drawn to the darkness. All you can do is protect yourself and the innocent ones." We talked for a long time that afternoon, about loss and betrayal and survival, about the strength it takes to do the right thing even when it costs you everything, about how to build a life from ashes. When I left her house, I felt lighter somehow, less alone. The months passed, then a year. Life developed a new normal. Amara adjusted, the resilient way kids do. The neighborhood gossip eventually died down. I made new friends, people who didn't know my story or didn't care. I even started dating, though nothing serious. I wasn't ready to trust someone new yet. Maybe someday. Terrell wrote me letters from prison. I didn't open them at first, just threw them away. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened one. It was full of accusations and self-pity. How I'd betrayed him, destroyed his life, turned everyone against him. How everything was my fault. There was no acceptance of responsibility, no real apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd tried to do to me. I threw the rest of his letters away unopened. Whatever closure I needed, I wasn't going to get it from him. 2 years after everything happened, I was in the grocery store, the same one where I'd met Mrs. Washington. I was picking up items for dinner when I saw her again. She was in the frozen food section, and when our eyes met, we both smiled. We walked toward each other and hugged like old friends. "How's Amara?" she asked. "She's good, really good. Smart as a whip, doing great in first grade." "And you?" "I'm good too, really. I got promoted at work last month. We're moving to a bigger place next month. Things are looking up." She squeezed my hand. "I'm so glad. You deserve happiness after everything." We chatted for a few more minutes, catching up on small things. Her grandchildren, my job, the weather. Normal, comfortable conversation. As we were saying goodbye, she said, "You know, you saved yourself. I just gave you a little push. The courage, the strength, that was all you." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you for that push, for everything." She hugged me one more time, and then we went our separate ways down different aisles. I finished my shopping and drove home, where Amara was waiting with my mother. We made dinner together, the three of us, filling my kitchen with laughter and the smell of food and warmth. Later that night, after Amara was asleep, I stood at my bedroom window looking out at the quiet street. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, naive, trusting, willing to overlook red flags because I wanted to believe in love and family and happily ever after. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more cautious, but also more authentic. Someone who'd looked at the worst truth and hadn't looked away. Someone who'd chosen to fight rather than become a victim. I thought about the old woman in the parking lot, falling on the ice. How a simple act of kindness had led to a warning that changed my life. How that warning had given me just enough time to save myself and my daughter. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't helped her that day, if I'd just walked past like so many others probably did. Would Terrell have succeeded in framing me? Would I be in prison now, separated from Amara, my life destroyed? Or would the truth have come out another way? I'd never know. What I did know was that I'd been given a gift, a warning, a chance, an opportunity to take control of my own story. And I'd taken it. The money was still out there somewhere, probably locked up in evidence until the legal proceedings were completely finished. I didn't think about it much anymore. It wasn't mine, not really. It was just a symbol of the life I'd escaped, the danger I'd narrowly avoided. What I had now was worth more than any amount of money. I had my daughter, safe and happy. I had my freedom. I had a future that belonged to me, not built on someone else's lies. I had survived. And I'd made sure that the man who tried to destroy me paid for his crimes. Not because I was vengeful, but because it was the right thing to do. Because silence and complicity would have made me guilty too. Because my daughter deserved to grow up knowing that truth and justice mattered, even when they were hard. I turned away from the window and went to check on Amara one more time before bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling with each breath, her face relaxed and innocent. I stood in her doorway and made a silent promise to her. I would never let anyone hurt her. I would never let anyone make her feel small or powerless. I would raise her to be strong, to trust her instincts, to help others when she could. I would teach her that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is look at an ugly truth and refuse to pretend it's beautiful. And I would tell her, when she was old enough to understand, about the old woman who fell on the ice, about how helping a stranger in need led to that stranger saving our lives, about how small kindnesses ripple outward in ways we can't predict, about how women look out for each other, especially when men let them down. I closed her door softly and went to my own room. I was tired, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from rebuilding your entire life from the ground up. But it was a good tired, an honest tired. I climbed into bed, my bed in my house that no one could take from me, and closed my eyes. The last thing I thought before sleep took me was how grateful I was for that icy parking lot, for that moment of falling, for that whispered warning that changed everything. Mrs. Washington had given me a gift that day. She'd given me a choice. And I'd chosen to fight. I'd chosen to survive. I'd chosen to protect my daughter and myself, no matter the cost. Tomorrow I'd wake up and do it all again. The ordinary work of living, the daily choice to move forward rather than look back. The snow had melted long ago, revealing the dead grass underneath, and spring was coming. There would be new growth, new beginnings. The side of the garage where the money had been buried was just a strip of muddy ground now, ordinary and unremarkable. No one would ever know what had been hidden there, no one except me. And I would carry that knowledge, that turning point, for the rest of my life. The moment everything changed, the moment I stopped being a victim and became a survivor. It all started with an old woman falling on ice. And it ended with me standing on solid ground, finally, for the first time in years. The truth had set me free, and I was never going back. Please tell me what you thought of the story in the comments below. And if you liked this tale, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me to keep creating these wonderful stories. Until tomorrow. All my love.